So it's pretty much normal that anytime you get a high profile case, there's going to be people who insert themselves into the case. People who know someone connected to the case and want to tell their story. Sometimes it's people who are just grifters, like the Gabby Petito case. I don't know if you remember, there was a woman who lived in, I think, Orange County, Florida, who claimed to have been an ex-girlfriend of Brian Laundrie. None of the stuff that she said fitted with what we actually found out. It was just a outright lie. Then you have the Kylie Rodney case with Megan Cole, mother of two teens who she swears were not at the party, but she knows so much more about the party than anybody else by the sounds of it. And of course, a few teens who came forward didn't give their names and gave interesting accounts, which some of which, the details of which were proven to be outright lies. And Maddie's case is no different. You have that H-Ghost guy who pretended to be a woman on both Reddit and Facebook and wheedled his way into both those groups, making up stories about Maddie, and then we discover that he's actually a predator and absolutely nothing to do with Maddie's case. You also have an individual who phoned guilty of crime, I believe, claiming to be a former flatmate. And there's a number of people who rang Gray Hughes, guys who claim to have known Stephan when he was younger. Now, you've always got to take these kind of things with a grain of salt. You need to put your thinking hat on and be super, super cautious. You've got to have your critical thinking at its top of the game, because you've got to question motivation. Some of these people do it because they want infamy. They want to be heard. I think in the Gabby Petito case, the woman who came forward claiming to be an ex-girlfriend of Brian was actually doing it on her own social media account. So she was doing it for the clicks. Megan Cole, in the Kylie Rodney case, a little bit of a narcissist, just loved the attention. She basically went from one live stream to the next, basically doing the, hey, it's me, it's Megan. And literally she was saying that in the chat. Trying to get people to invite her up on panel so she could share her version of the story. Sometimes people, though, just want to talk. They just want to get stuff off their chest. I know for me, if you are Australian, you may have heard of Martin Bryant. I hate even saying that name, but he was the gunman who went down to Port Arthur in Tasmania and shot 35 people, including two beautiful little girls. It was Australia's last mass shooting and the reason for all our gun laws. And I knew the guy. He used to watch us play over the fence as children because he lived next door to my grandmother's house. And my grandmother had this amazing backyard that was like a kid's paradise, full of fruit trees, on a hill, massive. It was on it was actually a couple of blocks. And he used to climb up on the fence and just sit and stare at us. And it reached the point where we became so afraid of this boy who was just a few years older than us that we would end up going inside and playing inside anytime he was around. Why am I sharing that story? Because for me, it's about just getting it off my chest. Knowing that you had this childhood interaction with someone who later went on to do such a hideous act, it does weigh on your soul a little bit. So there are people who share just because they want to get it off their chest. Because for them, it's something huge. Something that, for them to process it, they need to actually verbalise it. Now, the interview that I'm looking at today, I believe actually falls into that category. I've listened to it, and while obviously we don't know how much is exaggeration, we don't know if there's any add-ons in here that have been put in to make the story a little bit more sensationalist. But definitely there are things that this gentleman says which to me make it pretty clear that he did know Stephan when he was a child and when he was a teenager. So I wanted to go through this interview and just have a listen and think about how much is accurate and how much could be an exaggeration. This is one of 4 people who rang up Gray Hughes and chatted with him. Gray Hughes will, on his live streams, basically open up the phone lines for people to call in. So sometimes he does catch interviews like this. And this is one of them. So let's jump in and have a listen.
Yeah, I'm trying to just like go through my mind and remember all this stuff, but it's detailed. It's deep. Like my mom and his mom like did horses together at our house, and she had her horse at our house, so I would see Stephan daily. This is before high school, kind of around the time like Pokemon and stuff was coming out. Really around the time like Game Boy Color came out.
Now, just to give you an idea of the timeline, this interview was done 11 months ago, meaning the information about Deb having a horse and her taking Stephan out with her when she was at the horse wasn't publicly known. That was discussed in September in the interview with Hidden True Crime. So, straight up, that tells us that this guy is legit. He definitely did know Stephan. So that gives us somewhere to go from.
We were boys, so I mean we kind of became friends just being boys.
So what age were you guys when you guys first started becoming friends?
So we didn't go to like grade school together. I was being homeschooled at the time, and he was as well. So we didn't really we didn't go to school then. During high school, he went to Cherokee High School, and I went to Sequoia High School in North Georgia. But there's just a lot of details about my interaction with Stephan, just as being, preteen and teens, that he was a very strange, weird kid. Just collecting semen in bottles to...
Wow.
Like, I know, and a lot of this is just whacked. And the more I thought about it, the more I remembered, and I'm talking to my wife about it, and then I'm remembering things from then, and it was just like, he just collected weird things. He tried always making weapons out of weird stuff that were like concealable, like markers with, nails in them, and he liked to make blowguns with thumbtacks and just weird shit.
Straight up, these are the sort of things you hear about someone who later on becomes a predator. Putting S in bottles. That's just so gross. And collecting weird things, yep, that certainly sounds like him. We hear from everyone who knows him about his obsession with his little mini figurines, his Tamagotchi, his lightsabers. He definitely had a fixation with collecting things. And I find it believable also that he would be the sort of guy that would create weapons out of things. Don't forget that this guy had numerous firing devices, you know what I mean, at his parents' place. He had quite a collection of them. He even took one up to Kissimmee with him when he went up to see Jen and Maddie, and he had that one, the Glock or whatever it was, in the drawer of bedroom 4 with a magazine inside. He had it there in room 4, complete with ammunition. So I find this to be believable. And face it, when you look at Stephan's personality, I can see him as being that kid. The kid that basically did dumb, antisocial things for their own sadistic pleasure.
Anime, always into like weird anime stuff, very obsessed with that. His mom, that's a whole, and in another interview I listened to, the guy was talking about Debbie, and Debbie is an absolute abuser as well. I don't know if it went down the sexual route with Stephan, but just the level of verbal abuse, and sometimes we witness some physical abuse, was extreme.
Again, the comment about verbal abuse is so believable. In the interview that she did with Hidden True Crime, one of the things she spoke about was a time when she was annoyed with him because he hadn't tidied his room. So what did she do? She apparently took all his things out of his room, and this is in front of his friends apparently, took his car keys, took his wallet, and took the tags off his car. She humiliated him in front of his friends. There's ways of dealing with issues with difficult children. That's not one. And we also hear her in one of the interviews, her and Chris talk about when they first got married and they had some argument, and it sounds like she actually got a little bit violent with Chris. She dumped something all over his head or something like that, and basically he learnt to back off after that. So there's that, and it's not just that. A lot of the things that she says about Stephan suggest to me that behind the scenes she often denigrated him, often made him feel like a bit of a loser. It certainly strikes me from the many things that have been said that she could well have been somewhat verbally abusive with Stephan. Physical abuse? Possible. Sounds like she is definitely capable of firing up. At one point in the interviews with Deb and Chris refers to her having an Irish temperament, and she actually agreed to it and said, yes, she fires up like her grandmother or something like that. So we have them basically admitting that she's certainly not the perfect individual.
Well, it looked like there were some court cases back in like 1998 about custody.
Stephan got ran over in a parking lot. This is what I was told. Ran over by a guy. I think he was 18, 19 at the time. Stephan was playing in the parking lot, like a Pizza Hut or something. And I guess the mom, Debbie was paying. Well, Stephan ended up getting run over. The guy was backing out. Young. He was like, the driver was 17 or 18.
I see. Okay. Yeah. All right.
If I remember right, he had like a lifted Toyota. It's because they always hated him and his mom always hated lifted Toyotas because of this. But the story we were told was he was playing in the puddle with like a toy or something, and then the man, backed over him, not seeing him. So then they sued the man and got all this money, but it always seemed like Debbie would remind Stephan, you have anger issues because you got ran over and you're just never been right. So she always drilled that back into him. I don't know if an excuse for her to be mean to him, or it just seemed like a revolving wheel of, you're an asshole kid because you got ran over, and that's why I yell at you.
That is such classic emotional abuse. And if that is the case, well, then that would have definitely contributed to creating the monster that he is today. Is it believable? Yeah, it is. When you listen to the way Deb talks about Stephan, you can tell that it's a two-sided thing. On one hand, she would do anything for him by the sounds of it, but at the same time, everything she says about him is negative. When you listen to the way she speaks about him, she certainly makes it sound like he is just a complete and utter loser. So this makes sense to me. This makes perfect sense.
You know what I mean? That makes sense.
It's so weird too, because she probably profited off of that.
Oh, she totally did. And she sued another guy for some foot surgery, which backfired on her, and it wasn't even a big deal. And then she claimed to be crippled, but then she would go ride horses with my mom.
So we know from Paula that there was that settlement over the car accident, and that I think they received $20,000 for it. It's interesting that he's also referring to the issue with her foot surgery, and that she also attempted to sue over that. I believe the foot surgery, did that occur in California or Michigan? I'd have to look that up, because it would be interesting to see if there's any documentation relating to that. But it seems now that this whole family is obsessed with money. You had Chris saying that he gave up working as a police officer because he loved the idea of staying in fancy hotels and all that sort of stuff. And you have Stephan, who wants every toy under the sun. And now we're hearing about Deb, who seems to be quite happy to have legal cases where she's trying to get money out of people.
I don't know. It just, none of it ever really, she just seemed like a total piece of shit, just all the time.
Well, that sort of matches what the individual named Chase, the first interview that I did, said.
Yeah, no, and I heard that, and I was like, man, just thinking back about Debbie and how she would talk to him, but then she would then Stephan would show up with all these brand new, just released, toys, or like a Pokemon set or a Magic card set or figurines that he was some Star Wars figurines, or just something that you normally just don't go to the store and buy all this at once. And he would show up with it, of course he's going to boast it in front of me, and I'm like, oh man, that's cool and all, and we'd play with him or whatever next time I would see him. So I mean,
so that one also rings true. You had comments from Stearns' parents and from Jen about his need for instant gratification. If he wanted something, then he was gonna have it. And there was one comment that Deb made in the interview, I think with Hidden True Crime, where she spoke about how he would demand things and expensive things, and not just for birthdays or Christmas. And she claimed, but, tough on him because we wouldn't get them for him. And I thought the way she said it sounded somewhat disingenuous. And I remember when the first time I heard her saying it, I thought, based on everything else that she said in this interview, I got the impression that she actually was the sort of mother that would just get him everything he wanted. I mean, you have that story about him wanting to go and get a tattoo with his friends, and she was like, well, if you wait, I'll pay for one for you. Meaning, he wanted a tattoo, so she didn't want him getting one tacky one that would have been an embarrassment to her. So instead, she made him wait for a professional one. She paid for him to have a tattoo for his, I think she said, 21st birthday. So it sounds like not only were they enabling him behaviour-wise, but basically, if he wanted something, he got it.
Watching that interaction was interesting. I never really understood it at the time, being the age I was. But yeah, and then I remember multiple times where, he was trying to show me like a Hustler magazine he had gotten or something, and I'm like, well, where'd you get this? Where'd you get this? And he's like, oh, well, my mom gets them for me when my dad's out of town working. And I'm just like,
wow.
oh.
That's ridiculous.
So I know.
Was she abusing him in some way? Or?
I don't know. Stephan never said anything to me about that. I think that if she was, I don't think he would. Just the amount of temper that she would go into, I think he was very afraid of her.
Now, he's very specific there, saying Deb would buy him a Hustler magazine when Chris was out of town. And I don't know whether to believe this or not. Certainly from what Deb herself has said, she was a bit of an enabler, and she was a little bit indulgent with Stephan. She actually mentioned that in the Hidden True Crime interview. She was quite incensed that people would say that she had bought her son a Hustler magazine. I can see it two ways. I could actually believe her to do that. This is someone who was happy to pay for her son to have a tattoo for his 21st birthday, so maybe it was part of the I'm a cool mum routine. Sometimes what you see when you have a parent who is emotionally abusive, and it sounds like she was, is that the way they control someone is by giving them things, and then they threaten to remove that indulgence when a person doesn't oblige. So if she was emotionally abusive and he tried to fight back against it, then there's got to be currency. There's got to be something that you can say, well, okay, well, if you're not going to do that, you're not going to get any more Pokemon cards. Or if you're not going to do that, I'll tell your father that you're getting Hustler magazines. It's all part of the way someone works when they are an emotional abuser. Did she buy him Hustler magazines? Well, we haven't heard it directly from Stephan. The other side of that is that we know that Stephan is a big fat liar. So it's also possible that if Chris was out of town, it was easier for Stephan to steal money from somewhere in the house, perhaps, and get those magazines for himself somehow. He had a brother who was 10 years older than him, 10 or 11 years older than him, although That said, if he went into the armed forces straight after high school, as we are told, then he would have been out of Stephan's life from about the time that Stephan was 7 or 8. So possibly not something that he would have purchased for him. It's also possible that Stephan was stealing those magazines for himself, going into wherever you buy magazines and shoving them up under his top and then heading out the door. I don't know what the restrictions are in terms of buying those sorts of magazines in the United States, whether they are something that's just in a plastic wrap or whether they have to be requested over the counter, but don't know. I mean, if he was accessing Hustler magazines, he could just be saying that his mum bought them for him to hide the fact that she was emotionally abusive, to try and convince his friends that his mum was a cool person.
Probably still is.
And how old was he when she was buying these magazines for him?
We were probably 13 to 14, because I don't think I had my learner's permit in Georgia yet. So probably 13, 14.
And when you say he was storing like his own semen in little containers, or?
Oh yeah. He had this, and then he informed me that this was his newfound discovery, that if you poured it into the drinks, girls can get pregnant.
What? Jesus.
Yeah, dude.
Wait,
I wish I could make this up. I really wish this was not real, but he claimed that you could get girls pregnant by dumping sperm in their drinks, and they would never know who did it.
But that sort of implies that he did that or something. Like he poured that into drinks.
And it gets deeper than that.
I really don't want to delve much into the psychology of that, and I really don't want to dwell on it too much at all, because it is certainly a precursor to what he was doing later in life. So if it is true, then it's believable, but it's also really, really disturbing. It's also a little bit amusing if he actually believed that he could get girls pregnant that way.
So his mom's horse had some kind of joint problem in the knees or something, so she would have these little glass vials where she would give the horse shots every month or something like that. Well, he would steal those things, and he would deposit, I guess, semen in these things, and then would take them to school and then claim that he, did it. And I never believed him. I'm like, no, you did not, Stephan. You're lying. You didn't do this. And he's like, I did it. And, of course, I never believed that. I don't really think he did that. It just seemed too far-fetched.
Doesn't seem too far-fetched now, though, right?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. At the time, I was just blowing it off.
Yeah, I suspect that it probably was a tall tale on Stearns' behalf, because if you're talking about the sort of glass vials that you would have stuff in there for injections, then generally they have a sealed metal rim and then a rubber part inside that sealed metal rim where you put the needle through to draw back the injection. They are pretty flimsy glass vials, so even if you were to try to remove the metal rim or try to remove the rubber, you would probably destroy the vials. You certainly wouldn't be able to reseal them once you removed the rubber. So I suspect that he probably just stole a unused vial of whatever the injection was from his mother and was flashing around and coming up with this ridiculous story. Even still, it is a somewhat disturbing story for someone to come up with.
And it's not like I always wanted to hang out with this kid when I was a kid. You know, his mom would show up at our house because her horse was at our barn. So, you know, I don't have any brothers or sisters, and there's a kid my age here. So, I mean, of course I'm going to interact. But he was always odd and collected weird things. And then I saw the Reddit thing where he's collecting Tamagotchis, and that doesn't surprise me in any way that he still collects stupid shit like that.
Well, how old is he when you guys quit? You know, when you stopped being friends, I guess.
We kind of had. I'm trying to remember what the big falling out. Oh, I know exactly what it is because I was talking to my dad. So my dad caught Stephan. So my dad almost shot Stephan. And I just talked to my dad 2 days ago about it because he doesn't watch the news very much, and I was showing him the links of what happened, and he just is very shocked and feels terrible for the family. But we were talking about the time where my dad almost shot him.
Damn. Well, that's a missed opportunity, isn't it? He could have saved the world a lot of anguish and a lot of annoyance.
My mom was in the back bathroom of our house, and it's gated, it's fenced, so rarely did those blinds ever really get shut. So my mom sees somebody creeping around the awning area of our semi-covered shop, which is where both of their vehicles were parked, my mom and my dad. So tells my dad, my dad runs out there from the front and goes to the barn and, you know, sees this person, doesn't know who it is, sneaks up on him, and there was a light switch on both sides of the overhang where the cars are parked. My dad flicks it on and has his Glock 10 millimeter pointed at the person, tells him to turn around and startles him, and it's Stephan. And he was over there with a camera, and it appeared to be he was trying to take pictures of whatever my mom was doing in that back bathroom.
Okay, did anyone else just feel really sick when they heard that? I believe that totally. Now, it's interesting because when Deb and Chris are talking about them buying Stephan a gun for one of his birthdays, they claim that he claimed to have been held up at gunpoint, which to me sounded a little bit far-fetched. But maybe that's what he told his parents, and in actual fact, he was referring to this incident, and it traumatised him being caught by the neighbour's father and having a gun pointed in his face, because that would be traumatic even if you were in the wrong. Do I think this happened? Yeah, I do. These sort of things are in keeping with the kind of person that Stephan became. Often, these sort of freaks start out as peeping toms. And it seems like, given his tendency to get everything he wanted, he probably did say to his mum, I want a camera. And, well, the rest is history.
So
wow, so he was like peeping Tom on your your mom's bathroom.
And we had kind of started to not really talk to each other prior to that. I think he just weird. He was just always weird. So and I was real heavy in just spending a lot of time at the church, and that had more priority to me than talking to some weird guy. And I'm getting older, obviously, but my dad actually told Stephan, you really need to watch what you're doing, and took that that bullet that was in the chamber of the pistol, and he gave it to Stephan, was like, just keep this as a remembrance. You don't need to be doing this stuff. And I don't know. That was kind of the end of it there.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Dad said, he's like, I almost shot that kid. That kid at the time. I think he was just prior to being of age. I think Dad doesn't really know either. I asked him about it. 17, maybe just turned 17, so he was shot a minor, and it'd have been a big fiasco. So thank God he didn't do that, But
So if that happened when Stephan was 17, that actually fits in with this story that Chris said about Stephan wanting a gun and then buying him a gun for I think it was his 18th birthday, because of him being held up at gunpoint. So I think we've actually discovered the real story there. I wonder if they must have heard this one because they were commenting on the Hustler magazines. But they very carefully avoided discussing this in their interview with Hidden True Crime. It's interesting that Stephan became so gun obsessed and had so many guns. I guess, when you're a bit of a wiener like he is, and you have an experience like that, then you want to put yourself in a position, I guess, where someone's not going to get one up on you again. So it's a shame that this guy didn't try and scare him a little bit more.
Well, what are some of the other weird things that you guys, or he would do that you remember when?
Everyone's commenting on the knuckle thing, and Stephan definitely had a lot of weird, like, tics, and loved to pop his neck and his back. Definitely popping the knuckles, biting the nails. Would make weird comments just in a group of friends, or be loud to get attention, but then would just kind of stare off into space and not know what to do after he made the weird noise.
Now, this is something that I've been avoiding saying for a very, very long time, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I can't help wondering if Stephan was autistic. Why did I not want to say that? Because you can't blame his actions and the person he became on his autism. I know so many people who are on the autism spectrum, and being on the autism spectrum does not create a sociopath like what I believe Stephan is. But doing the things like cracking his knuckles and that sounds like a form of stimming. Stimming is something that people who are on the autism spectrum do. It's a way of calming themselves. It's a way of regulating. Not knowing how to appropriately interact with other people is also a big thing for people with autism. And there are so many other signs with him, especially his obsession with those little Warhammer things or whatever they're called, that point towards autism. He claims to be ADHD. I don't see anything in him really. Yeah, hyperfocus can be an ADHD thing, but I don't see much in him that would make me think he was ADHD, but I could believe him being ASD, autism spectrum disorder. But the things this guy is describing definitely sounds like Stephan, and it's disturbing.
I I guess
And,
everybody
yeah,
look at
dude,
me, but I have nothing to say.
yeah, exactly. And just would do stuff like that. I will tell you this, that kid did not like to bathe. He just would wear the same shorts for weeks. And I don't know why Debbie wouldn't wash his damn clothes. I don't know. I didn't know, but he was just always dirty, or hair was oily and just unkept.
Did you know the
Well, that hasn't changed, has it? When you look at the records from the jail, he has been not washing, he has been refusing changes of clothes, and there's a reason he's called Stinky Stearns. And I know some people find that offensive, but at the end of the day, that's what it is.
father at all? He seemed.
Yeah, Chris was always kind of disconnected. He worked at the time. When my family knew his family. Chris worked at a sauce, like, condiment distribution company, or packaging company, I think, which required travel. He wasn't really ever there. He never was really. I never saw him get real mean with Stephan. It was mainly just Debbie, but I would see Debbie get mean with Chris too. So I think Chris was just like, "This is crazy."
Yeah, it's almost like he got like I said to Chase. It seems like the father just got really a bad lot in life.
You know, I got that impression in terms of their family relationship. While I do think that Chris may have helped Stephan in some regards after what happened, and that there was a definite reason for him travelling to Northport from Northport in the middle of the night. But I also, if you have a look at the interview they did with Hidden True Crime, and I might go through that just to have a look at some of the body language that occurs throughout that interview, because it's really quite fascinating. Basically, you can tell she is the one in that relationship that calls the shots. I think he was perhaps the peacekeeper in the family, and I suspect that the reason that he chose that travelling salesman job was to get away from Deb, and that she probably was somewhat emotionally abusive with him also. I guess some people, it just becomes convenient to stay in a marriage. They say that they are sleep divorced and that they sleep in separate areas. Well, yep, some people, when they're older, they do that because someone snores, or a lot of women around menopause get that time when they get hot through the night and their partner doesn't appreciate having the covers thrown off. So, you know, there are so many reasons that couples who are still good, loving, connected couples will sleep apart. But when they said that they were sleep divorced, I kind of felt that maybe there was a disconnect in their relationship. And I think there's probably a lot of tension that goes on there. I wouldn't be surprised if, in terms of raising Stephan, that Chris probably tried to be the voice of reason on occasion and got overridden by Deb frequently. That's the impression I get from listening to their conversations about Stephan and from watching their interview with Hidden True Crime.
Like a wacky wife and a crazy kid. Yeah.
I guess he never really had any red flags, I would say. You know, I'm trying to remember things. He just seemed normal, dressed nice.
Did he have a brother or anything?
Yeah, Stephan's got a half brother. I can't for the life remember his name. I was trying to remember before you called me.
And who's the half brother? The side of the dad or the mom?
Mom.
Okay.
Yeah, the mom. Debbie's son. He was in the Navy. I do know that. But there was part of the interview that I was listening to. You said it wasn't yours. I'm really not sure. Where Debbie claimed that Stephan had been shot or something. That never happened. That's a lie. That is not true. I don't know why Debbie told the roommate that Stephan was living with. Maybe just for sympathy or something. I can totally see her doing that.
What was the point? What was the thing that you... I'm trying to remember what you were talking about.
I heard on an audio recording one of this... I'm not really sure now, but where the roommate was talking about... Stephan's roommate was talking about Stephan got shot or something in California, and that's why he was weird and had to go through therapy.
No, it was something about... No, it was more that he got in a fight. There was some guy that beat him up really bad, but he pulled out a knife and stabbed the guy.
So right there is a good example of why we have to be really, really careful when we listen to people who insert themselves into cases like this. Now, we heard directly in the Hidden True Crime interview from Deb and Chris that, according to them, Stephan was walking down the street with his friends, minding his own business, and then some guy in a car pulled up. Somebody mouthed at the guy. I think the gist is that Stephan actually mouthed at him, and this guy unfolded himself out of the car, making him sound like he's a big dude, and set onto Stephan, and Stephan just happened to have a pocket knife in his pocket from being at church camp, like sure, and stabbed the guy. And somehow this story has come out at one point that someone shot Stephan. So I think what's happened here is that stories have been mixed up, and perhaps Stephan had over-exaggerated what had occurred and somehow added in the incident with this guy's father threatening him with a gun and mixed it all together into a new story. Or the person telling the story got it all mixed up and came out with something different. So, like I said, we always need to be careful when we are listening to things like this in terms of making sure that we are getting factual information.
Yeah, no, that's I would have heard about it because my mom and his mom have still remained, I guess, acquaintances up until even now.
Well, I guess the mom would have to tell somebody that, oh, my kid stabbed somebody. It's possible.
Yeah, and I think she would have told my mom because, like, when all this stuff went down, my mom called me immediately. I mean, within like minutes of it even hitting the news, and told me. So I feel like we would have heard about that.
Well, it might have been a story. Well, let's see. So I can't remember if Chase was saying it was when they knew each other.
Debbie lied to the roommate about why Stephan pulled a gun on him or something like that.
Right, could be. Yeah,
that's just a big BS lie. I mean, for Debbie to lie and say some shit like that, I can totally see her doing that. So
I see. Yeah.
They're both just like the mom and Stephan are just both just whacks. They're out there, man.
I must admit, I had wondered. I mean, Deb certainly comes across to me as being a bit interesting. But a lot of times when she made comments about Stephan, it sounded to me like she was gaslighting him. And she actually was accusing him of being a gaslighter and all sorts of things like that. But I couldn't help thinking, based on the other things that they were saying, that in fact it's a two-way street and that she's actually quite skilled herself at gaslighting, quite manipulative and quite emotionally abusive. I could definitely imagine her lying to protect Stephan. If you followed my channel for a while, I've looked at videos, or I've done videos where I've looked closely at Deb and Chris, and I've shown inconsistencies from Deb. I've shown where she's changed her story or where she's lied. And it seems like it is her first instinct to protect Stephan. So I do find that believable.
Did he do anything abnormal when, just discussing girls and things like that when you were younger, like 13, 14, 15?
He just worshipped porn. He's just into porn, loved it, would print stuff out and had like collections and just, folders within folders on his computer. And he's trying to get me to look at this stuff, and I'm like, no, man, I'm not into this, And then he would try to show me like on his the laptop, and I'm just, it was just weird. The amount of consistent pushing from him for me to look at it with him, or hey,
I wonder why though. Isn't that sort of odd in a way? It's almost like you might have been his first sort of interest or something.
To me, what he's saying there is that it was an attempt by Stephan to normalise what was far from normal behaviour. If he had already had, as a teenager, thousands and thousands of images on his computer, him trying to get this friend to look at them with him, that to me says that he realised that was wrong, and therefore wanted to normalise it by having a co-conspirator who could basically give him the justification. A co-conspirator who could make him feel better about his perversion because he wasn't the only person interested in that, if that makes sense. And you know what makes that really, really disturbing? That to me says that he almost certainly had to have been sharing images online. He had to have sought out a community of like-minded people in order to have justified in his mind what he was doing. Just consider the implications of that when it comes to the 1,700 images of Maddie.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. He just, the obsession with the porn and the anime figures and,
yeah.
It's just all over his room. Nothing wrong with anime. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to get haters from people that are in anime. But the type of anime he just seemed to have all the time around him, and the type of weird things he's holding on to.
As an artist, I have experimented with a lot of different styles of artwork. And in terms of anime, anime is wonderful. There is some gorgeous anime artwork out there. But if you're an artist and you are searching for anime artwork to maybe base something original on, trust me, there is a lot of really, really inappropriate anime artwork that will come up in Google image searches. Maybe not if you are just searching for anime specifically, but if you are looking for something more specific, so you type in some sort of qualifier, I don't know, crying girl anime, then once you start adding in qualifiers, then that's when you start seeing some images that you really don't want to see. It seems to me that there is definitely a bit of a perversion amongst some anime artists.
They were just it's just weird stuff that I don't know, just weird stuff. Obsessed. He's obsessed with it.
Well, it's kind of odd for somebody to go, "Hey, let's go look at porn together."
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just kind of strange.
We're trying to play, Pokemon on our little, Game Boy Pockets. Playing those games, and then he's trying to drag this stuff out. And I told my parents about it. Parents and I were always been honest with each other and nothing to hide from them. So, I'd kind of they would distance me from Stephan for a while, and then a couple times they told Stephan's mom, and then then Stephan's getting his ass beat, and then Stephan's mad at me, and that happened a couple of times.
So I was actually about to say that given the relationship between his mother and Stephan's mother, that it would have been a topic of conversation between them, and then he says they told Stephan's mum. And how interesting is it that in the Hidden True Crime interview, she basically pleads ignorance. No idea why he's like that. There were no signs, basically, when he was growing up or anything. Of course her son's not perverted. So, a bit of denial happening there.
And then at one point she said that I was lying, that Stephan never did those things, and so it's just a roller coaster with his family.
Well, that's definitely in keeping with her wanting to pin everything back on Jen, isn't it? It sounds like she's spent a lifetime trying to cover his ass, basically. And if anyone has any criticism of him or basically dumps him into trouble for anything, they're lying. Or they're the person who did it. I actually find this guy to be quite believable. The things he is saying don't sound like an over-exaggeration. He sounds genuine to me. And what he is saying, I can relate to it in terms of what we've heard in interviews with Deb and Chris.
Yeah, and then, this is just, it's still wild to me that this is what's happened. I just still can't believe it. I'm like,
do you guys ever go on adventures together? Like kids always did. We used to always make like forts out of blackberry bushes and crap like that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we lived in North Georgia in the Appalachians, basically. So, yeah, we'd play in the woods and make little fires and, whatever normal boys do.
Yeah, so all that stuff was kind of normal.
Normal, yeah. Really always liked weapons, though, like the secretive ones. He always wanted, what was one thing he always wanted? Oh, it was a sword hidden in a staff. He always wanted that. He just likes stuff like that. Not that that's, I don't know if it's weird or not.
It does seem like he's into weapons. I mean, especially guns now. Like he was on Reddit talking about specific guns and.
Was he? Yeah, I don't know. I haven't talked to him in years.
I'm going to say, if everything that we're hearing from this guy is true, then it's a damn good thing that they caught him out after what he did to Maddie. Because it sounds like this is a guy who has some major obsessions. And I think had he not been caught out after Maddie's death, then his behaviours could have escalated. His obsession with weapons, well, we knew that he was obsessed with guns. We know that he used to carry a knife, and this guy is talking about how he wanted weapons that could be like concealable, hidden weapons, like a knife that you could hide, which, you know, a bigger version of a pocket knife, essentially. So, what I'm hearing here makes me think, A, it's fortunate that this guy was homeschooled, because he has all the signs of someone who could have done some damage in a school had they just snapped at one point, if you get what I'm talking about. But certainly, failing that, I think his behaviours would have escalated after Maddie's death had he not been arrested. And I think that he would have been emboldened after Maddie's death. I think you would have seen him probably separate from Jen and start targeting women. Or he could have become one of these predators who would snatch children off the street. But I certainly, from what I'm hearing here, can picture this guy escalating. Now, perhaps the reason he hadn't escalated prior to what happened with Maddie is because of his drug addiction. And maybe that is a fortunate thing. Maybe he was just too doped out to achieve his full, I hate saying it as potential, but you know what I mean. Maybe if he wasn't so drugged out, he could have been dangerous. Not that he wasn't dangerous, but he could have been far more dangerous.
But when I saw his interview, I'm like, this dude's fucking lying right now. I've seen him do the same face, the same cry, right in front of his mom on multiple occasions. He's fucking lying.
Well, that's funny because the other guy said the same
thing.
thing. He said he could tell he was lying immediately.
Oh yeah, dude. I know he's lying. He's just because I've seen him do that. Hey, Stephan, you idiot. Did you do this? And oh no, and start crying. So it looked the same, just with a beard now. I'm like, this guy's so stupid.
Which would explain why, in one of those interviews, Deb claimed that in the interview that she saw on television, she could see how distraught he was. And when I heard her say that, I thought, are you kidding me, woman? Are you kidding me? The guy is faking it so badly. And yet she was claiming that, how could you fake that? Look at him, he was just so distraught and upset. And that she believed that he was just so upset about Maddie being missing. Well, if he had spent a lifetime doing that to get out of trouble with her, no wonder she believed it.
Yeah, so what was it like when you heard this news? It must have been really trippy. Like, wow, this is some guy that I just thought was, kind of weird, but we hung out.
Yeah, and then I think about it, and I'm like, I can see it. I can see this guy getting so obsessed with something, and it engulfing him, and now it's led him down this path where he's at now.
So he hit the nail on the head there. What was going on with Stephan was an obsession. It was all-consuming. I think someone mentioned previously that Stephan had a full-time job, and his full-time job was Maddie. Even when he was at his parents' place, he would have been obsessing over Maddie. He still would have been going over his images, his videos, and figuring out how he was going to get access to Maddie again. So yes, this was an obsession. This was an unhealthy obsession that ended badly.
This is where these obsessions just take over.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, but then again, I'm not. And then the stupidity of throwing shit in dumpsters. It's like, what an idiot.
And how many years did you guys actually know each other for? About
how many years?
Yeah, I mean, you think. What? I mean, how old was he when this whole thing went down? When he looked into your mom's, that was the end of it, right?
Yeah, we were almost. I think we were 17 when that happened.
So had he dated any girls at school?
He did. I just don't remember who they were. And I tried to remember this the other day because I was like, man, I wonder what these girls are thinking. But I just can't remember any of them. I didn't know them either. But after the whole gun thing, my dad almost shooting this kid on our property for being a weirdo. There was no interaction. I think my dad and I both made it pretty clear that probably should just stay on their side of the fence.
So was he trying to film your mom, or was he just...
Yeah, that's what it appeared to be. He never admitted to anything. Imagine that. But he had a camera, a little digital camera. He's literally standing under our overhang on our property. He had to have jumped a fence because we had a 4-foot fence. So he deliberately was there to do something like filming or taking pictures, or again, just kind of obsessed with something and wanting to collect something.
How far away did he live from you at the time?
So 2 houses down, so...
Oh, so pretty close.
Yeah, close enough to where we could hear Debbie screaming at him sometimes when he was in trouble.
Okay, I couldn't help myself. I snorted when he said that he could hear Debbie screaming at him when he was in trouble, because I could imagine her being that sort of parent that would scream at him when he was in trouble. So I'm wondering if it was around that time that they moved away from there and moved to Florida, because it sounds like they have lived in several different states, and they're always very careful about, or in the interviews with Deb and Chris, they were always a little bit vague about moving, other than at one point saying that they had to move somewhere because her mother was dying with cancer or something. But it sounds like, yeah, after that, it sounds like they probably weren't welcome at that property. And I wonder if that prompted them to move elsewhere.
Wow. But yeah, one night he just came over, jumped over a fence, and was trying to take a picture of your mom. Man, and he almost got shot.
Yeah, almost got shot. Yep. My dad almost killed him. And gave him the bullet. He ejected the round out of the block and gave it to him. Was like, this is yours, bud.
I wonder if he still has it.
I don't know.
I would imagine he
probably does. I don't know. Maybe he made something.
Yeah.
He's worshipping it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like that little quip. Maybe he made something out of it. I would imagine that he would have kept that bullet not as a trophy, but as a reminder that someone got one up over him, and as a reminder to be more cautious with his exploits, so to say. So I don't think he would have taken it as a warning. I think he would have taken it as more of something to hang on to as a reminder to not get caught in future. So that's the end of that interview. I found it quite interesting and quite insightful. And when I think of it in comparison with the interview that Chris and Deb did with Hidden True Crime, and I'll add the link for that below so you can go and watch that again too if you like, because pretty much everything this guy has said fits in with things that we've heard said by Chris and Deb. It sounds like he knew Stephan for maybe 4 or 5 years, but 4 or 5 years as a teenager. And if you think back to when you're a teenager, those sort of friendships are the friendships that are really deep friendships when you really, really know someone really well. I think them hanging out together on the farm while the mothers are riding their horses or doing stuff with their horses. Yeah, you could imagine definitely spending quite a bit of time together. So I find this person credible, and I think most things that he said sound believable to me. I would be curious to know. I'm going to have to go back. Oh, we haven't actually seen a state's witness list, have we? I would love to see the state's witness list, because I would be curious to know if this guy is actually on any witness lists, because I think he has some really interesting things to say about Stephan. It's a shame that we've not heard from any ex-girlfriends from when he was younger, but at the same time I can understand why none of them would want to come forward and talk about him. Who'd want to admit to having been his girlfriend? You just wouldn't, would you? So that brings us to the end of this one. I will leave the link to this original interview below, and I'll also add it to my case file playlist, which has got all the original interviews, so that you can access it that way too anytime you wish. So thanks for listening. If you are new, please subscribe to my channel. Also, please hit the like button, because YouTube loves that, and that just gets me out into the algorithm a little bit more. And leave a comment below. What are your thoughts on this interview? I'm really interested to hear what people are thinking. So thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.